The Holyoke Public Safety Committee meeting tonight to discuss the audit of the city's police department. Thanks for joining us here on Western Mass News at 10. I'm Chris Pisano. Now, we first reported these findings to you when they were released more than a week ago. And tonight, the auditors sitting down with city leaders to present their report. Western Mass News reporter Maria Wilson joining us live in studio with the latest from tonight's meeting. Maria?
Chris, city councilors were finally able to bring their questions about this audit directly to those who drafted it.
For the first time in a long time, a path has been created to get us here into this very space to start these discussions of what the landscape is like at the department, identify what is it we do well, and where are we falling short.
Representatives from Municipal Resources Incorporated, or MRI, presented the audit's findings before Holyoke Mayor Garcia and the Public Safety Committee at Monday night's meeting. The City Council requested this audit more than a year ago to see how the Holyoke Police Department can improve. Some of the report's key findings include that 69% of employees do not believe the department is well managed, and 66% say they feel undertrained. MRI also unveiled recommendations going forward, including more training, bringing in civilians to perform jobs that do not require sworn officers, improving evidence storage practices, strengthening communication, and managing overtime. The auditors repeatedly emphasized the importance of accrediting the police department, which would include implementing an accredited training program.
There's things that are required that are in there. It is hard work, but as Sean points out, we think it would address many of your concerns or the concerns that we located within the in the report.
Public Safety Committee members giving their feedback to the report.
Just with everything that I'm experiencing in City Council, I need to adjust my expectations because I think I was expecting a lot different of an audit. This was actually characterized now as risk review from the report. It doesn't really feel like the audit that we were being told we were going to get.
Several city councilors also brought up the threats portion of the report, which named several city councilors as threats, including citing one city councilor's past criminal history. But overall, those in attendance expressed their gratitude for this report. Reporting live in studio, Maria Wilson, Western Mass News.